Good morning, everyone. Mike Fiebernitz, Remax Southern Shores, coming to you for another Fiebernitz Friday, where we throw casual Friday out the window still, and then the week on a high note, wearing my suit, tie, and my customary pocket square. So shout out to my mother for this pocket square. Basically, I took two old ties and asked my mother, hey, could you make me a pocket square? And she did a phenomenal job. So thanks, Mom. So let's jump into the numbers, and then we have got a huge topic to talk about, and you definitely want to stay tuned for this topic. So real quick, for all you condo owners, up 0.3% this past week, brings you up for the year 1.6% compared to last year's average sales price. Residential market up 0.1%, up 1.1% this year compared to last year's average sales price. Land market down 0.2% this past week. You're still up, though, 6.6% this year compared to last year's average sales price, which, basically 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, huge plot of land sold for like $18 million, like 1,700 acres out in Conway, and that just drove the average sales price up. So that's why you're 6.6%. Hopefully more closings will happen and that land market will stay there. So this week's topic, huge topic coming down on the real estate industry, and that is an update on the NAR, National Association of Realtors settlement, and what it means to you. So to give you an idea, 2 weeks ago, the NAR settled a massive lawsuit over realtors' commissions. Now, a bunch of points were agreed upon that the NAR will start implementing. Two big main points. I'm not going to go through all of the points because I heard it's like 1,100 pages. But two main points that I'm going to touch on today that's important for what's about to happen is, the first one is we can no longer offer buyer agent commissions through the MLS listing. So to give you an idea on this, whenever I put in a listing for my seller, I put number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, and then I put 3% for the buyer agent's commission. So buyer agents know, okay, Mike is offering me 3% to bring a buyer. That line goes away, and I can't put anywhere else in the listing. Not even hidden away in a separate document in a document folder in the listing. It goes away completely. Can't offer it through the MLS, okay? Huge. Second thing is the buyer agents are required basically now to have a buyer agency agreement before even working with a buyer or showing a property, okay? Now, these are the two main points I'm going to touch on today, and the NAR must basically implement these changes and processes by mid-July. All right, now, full disclosure before I jump into all this information, the full details and the new processes and procedures around this settlement have not been finalized, okay? The settlement is right now on a desk in front of a judge for the judge to sign off on. Once the judge signs off on, then the NAR is going to turn around and start putting together the paperwork, the changes, and what needs to happen in order for us as an industry to be able to adhere to these changes. So I'm going to give you what I believe the landscape is going to be and will probably look like. So let's jump into it. Number one, let's talk about this commission change. So I know a lot of news channels and major news channels are saying the commissions are going away, no more of the 6%. So these 6% commissions aren't necessarily going away. As a seller, you could still offer a 3% commission to the buyer's agent. okay? It's just we cannot publish that or market it to the open market of buyer agents through the MLS because basically, a couple of sellers said we colluded with the buyer's agents to inflate commissions. So basically, we can't have that in the MLS. You can still offer as a seller commission to a buyer's agent, to bring a buyer. Now, buyer's agents will now have to basically contact the listing agent, me, to see if the seller is offering compensation and how much, if they are. Now, if the seller is offering no compensation or partial of maybe, let's just say, example, the 3%, then the buyer agent will have to get their compensation or the difference of the 3% that the seller is paying from the buyer. Okay? So, here are my thoughts around this whole commission change. First thing, this is going to be a mess with the buyers because mid-July they'll now be told you have to pay the full commission or part of it if the seller doesn't. So mid-July comes around, I could already see it. Basically, buyers have known the seller pays the commission for like 100 years. And now they're being told, hey, you have to pay this 3% commission at closing, which they've never known to have to pay, okay? It will take some time for the buyers to basically become accustomed to this change. So that's why it's going to be a mess. Buyers are going to say, hey, I'm not paying that. And then it's just going to be a back and forth before eventually the change is basically going to take effect, okay? Second thing, if the buyer has to pay the commission or the compensation, will they pass on buying your house for a house that a seller is willing to pay the buyer agent's fee? Okay, so let's say you're a seller and you go, I'm not paying the buyer's agent. They can get that fee from the buyer. And the buyer comes up and goes, hey, $500,000 house, seller, how much are you going to pay my buyer's agent fee? Seller says 0. Then that buyer is probably going to go, well, I'm going to go buy this house where the seller is paying the 3%, so I don't have to come out of pocket for that. So that's a question, huge question, of what could happen if the buyer decides to pass because they're going to incur costs. Third thing, regarding negotiations. So if there is no compensation from the seller and the buyer still decides to buy your property, I believe buyers will basically start cutting the price by the amount of compensation they have to pay their buyer's agent right off the top since the seller isn't paying it. So on a $500,000 house that the seller isn't paying the 3% buyer agency fee, buyer's going to go, well, you have 3% of negotiations already, so I'm going to base my offer price off an asking price of $485 because I have to incur the 3% fee. Plus, buyers will ask for closing costs to be paid by the seller to cover this compensation. It's been happening for years for other stuff. They're just going to do it the exact same thing if you don't offer the compensation. So let's say, for instance, and I've done, this has happened to me plenty of times before. Seller goes, I'm not paying for the broke fridge. Buyer goes, well, I'm not moving forward unless you give me a $2,000 credit for the broke fridge because you said it was working. Or the HVAC is shot, it's not working, I want an $8,000 credit. And then the seller goes, well, what do I do? Do I give them an $8,000 credit or do I let the deal fall through and then I got to deal with another buyer? Buyers have been doing this for years. If they want something repaired, replaced, or fixed, they ask the seller to credit them if they're not willing to repair or replace it or fix it. Okay? So they're probably no difference. It's going to happen the same thing with compensation to their buyer's agents if the seller doesn't offer or offer the full, whatever commission, let's just say 3%. Fourth thing, now, there could be a chance that some individuals could pay a 9% total commission between buying and selling a property, okay? So I could see this happening when you decide to sell. You basically become a buyer. You sell your property, you turn around, you got to buy. So let's say you go to sell and you decide, I'm going to offer 6%. I'm okay with paying the buyer agent's fee so I can get all the buyers to come to my house and buy it, okay? Now, when you turn around and you go to buy, the seller you're buying from says, I'm not paying your buyer agent's fee. You have to pay for it. Then you have to pay a 3% commission. And I'm just using this as an example, okay? 6 and 3%, it's just an example. Okay, that's a total of 9% total commission you paid out to sell and buy, okay? As it is now, the buyer does not pay a commission. So if you sell a property, you offer 6%, you turn around and buy, you pay 0%. That's a total of 6% between buying and selling. So one individual could pay 9%. And I don't think it's going to happen often, but an individual could pay 9%. All right, so huge. Now, let's talk about the second, the second basically term, and that is buyer agents will be required to have a buyer agency agreement signed by the buyer before working for or showing a property to that buyer. All right. So here are my thoughts on this. One, this should have already been taking place between buyer agents, but we've come accustomed to not getting this signed, and then we turn around, show properties, go to make the offer, and then we stick the buyer agency agreement in with the other 40 sheets of the offer. They sign it. Hey, by the way, I'm your agent exclusively. Okay. Here's my thoughts. One, this will eliminate tire kickers. Okay. This is great if you're a seller because now no longer are we going to get those, tire kickers just wanting to look at a property just to look, because tire kickers aren't serious buyers in the first place. All they want to do is just waste time and look at a property just to look, okay? That's why they're called tire kickers. They are not going to want to sit down for a consultation with a buyer's agent, nor are they going to sign anything just to look at a property that they aren't going to buy. So this is good for the industry, especially sellers, because now you're not going to have to get the house prepared, get out of the house for an hour for a tire kicker that's not even going to buy the house in the first place. I like this, okay? Second, second thing regarding these agreements will state the buyer agency fee that the buyer has to pay if the seller doesn't pay it, okay? If the seller pays half of the buyer agency fee, then the buyer is on the hook for the rest of the fee. So if the seller goes, I'll pay 1.5%, and the agreed upon percentage between the buyer and buyer agent's 3%, then the buyer has to pay the difference of 1.5% at closing. Again, this will take time for the buyer to wrap their heads around because the industry will change. How long these changes will take effect? It depends on how long the buyers will, grow accustomed to these new changes. Now, again, as I said in my full disclosure, this is not finalized yet. We don't know the processes. We don't know what we can or can't do exactly. So this is a lot of speculation on my part. So don't take this as set in stone. I'm waiting for the NAR to come to us and go, hey, here's what you have to do. This document has to be signed. You got to do this, 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 this. So until that happens, hopefully it will be soon. I'll be able to come back to you and go, here is what we have to do. and then I'll convey whatever the NAR tells us we have to do in the future. Folks, that's all I got this week. Have a wonderful weekend. And March Madness, we're already seeing some upsets. Fantastic. If you guys got any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Love to be a resource to help you out. Sorry for this long video, but have a good one.